What's good? Chosen gang, spiritual mafia in the motherfucking building. Sorry I sound like this nigga just woke up. I woke up like this. Anyway, look. We finna debunk this little fucking shit they talking about we came from monkeys. Bruh, they saying a meteor crashed to Earth, created monkeys which evolved to us. So they're saying we came from space monkeys. If you believe that shit, you're fucking retarded. Not only that, they're basically saying that we were a mistake. We were not supposed to be here because we came from outer space, which is space monkeys. Now let's get to it. Now look at this. Spatial report with space monkey named Human. You see this shit? I really shouldn't even be having to do this, man. If you still believe that we came, it's 2020, man. That's just like they got y'all believing that we're aliens and that we're extraterrestrials and all of it, bro. If y'all still believe this shit, man, you need some help. You really, really, really need some help. The Most High does not make mistakes. The Most High does not make mistakes. They're saying that we came from outer space on a meteor. The meteor crashed into Earth. When the meteor crashed into Earth, monkeys came out, which eventually evolved into cavemen and humans and all of that. Well, here's the question: if we evolved from space monkeys, why are monkeys still here? Exactly. But it's also another thing we want to talk about is pre-dynastic period in Egypt. Now, this was before the Black Greeks had came and made a truce with the Egyptians, before the Egyptians had started eating meat. You guys have to remember that the homosexual act was practiced way before the Greeks even came. Our people fucked up, pretty much, is what I'm trying to say. It was a lot of stuff that they started doing that they wasn't supposed to do. Like, we had people, a lot of people don't even know where the actual secret meeting came from in these secret societies. Back in Egyptian time, you had people who went out to go hunt meat, but they did it secretively because you have to remember that at this time they were only vegans. They were only supposed to be eat vegan food. Meat was not, because when you eat meat, it messes up how the earth operates. We were supposed to be eating meat. It was a point of time when animals did not hunt each other, but when we started to hunt the animals for food, it changed everything. We were complete vegans at this time, and you had a group of people who had started a secret society pretty much, and they were going out to hunt meat. And then they started to bring the meat to the village piece by piece, and people started to get addicted to this meat. And it came to the point to where you will be buying a whole bunch of fruits, plants, and you'll be like, I'm hungry. And then that right there is what turned the men into the rulers, because now you have to go to these men for food. You have to go to these men when you're hungry. So you have to go and approach these men and let them know that you're hungry, and you have to do that's where work came from. You had to do some work to get some of the meat. We're going to be talking about pre-dynastic period in Egypt, and then we're going to be talking about the period after that, so you guys can see the difference of what I'm talking about. And as you can see, they did worship the mother goddess, but all of that changed pretty much. This new world order has been taking place for a long time, and people think that it's about to start. No, it started when they started to make these peace treaties. And it initially started in ancient Egypt when you had the Greeks. That's where the pharaohs come from. You had an Egyptian pharaoh and you had the Greek pharaoh, and they made a peace treaty because they got tired of having wars and arguing with each other. So they had made a treaty, and once they made that treaty, the false indoctrination came into place. You guys have to keep that shit in mind. There was a mother goddess. The men used to worship the woman. The woman was in charge of the garden. She was in charge of growing the fruits and the vegetables so that people could eat. So when you were hungry, you went to mama, you went to the woman. The woman was in charge of the garden. There was no work. The only work that they had to do in those times was making sure that the garden was right. Work actually came about when they brought the meat into the world and they started to feed the people meat. And when the people got hungry, they had to go to the man who was hunting the meat. So in order for you to get some meat, you had to work for that man and he'd throw you a piece of meat. Now, the pre-dynastic period in ancient Egypt is the time before recorded history and Paleolithic to the Neolithic age. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And on to the rise of the first dynasty, and is generally recognized as spanning era from c. 6000 to 3150 BCE. Through physical evidence argues for a longer history, while there are no written records from this period. Archaeological excavations throughout Egypt have uncovered artifacts which tell their own story of the development of the culture in the Nile River Valley. The periods of the pre-dynastic period are named for the region's ancient cities in which these artifacts were found and do not reflect the names of the cultures who actually lived in those areas. So basically this right here is telling you how about the written history of the pre-dynastic time in Egypt. And though it says that the lifespan is longer, there was no written evidence, so you can't go by something that has no evidence. The pre-dynastic period was given its name in the early days of archaeological expeditions in Egypt before many of the most important finds were discovered and cataloged, which has led some scholars to argue over them. Precisely, the pre-dynastic period begins and more importantly ends. And you have to remember it ended because the Dark Age started when the Greek pharaohs, there were black Greeks, Greek pharaohs and the Egyptian pharaohs made a pact. You have to remember that the world did not just, well, me personally, I believe that the world did not just start off black, because if that's the case, and then they say that there was a theory going around that the blacks created the white man, and if that's the case, then that means we created evil. You just got to do critical thinking. I believe that when the Creator manifested this creation, that there were all colors around all the world, and just at the time of the Egyptians, there was only black people there until the white man came and made his mark on the land. These scholars suggest the adoption of another designation, proto-dynastic period, for that span of time closer to the early dynastic period, or zero dynasty. The designators are not universally agreed upon, and pre-dynastic period is the term most commonly accepted for the period prior to the first historical dynasties. Manetho's history. In charting the history of ancient Egypt, scholars rely on archaeological evidence in ancient works such as the Egyptian dynasty chronological of Manetho, a scribe who wrote the Egyptiki, I don't know how to say that, the history of Egypt in the 3rd century BCE. The scholar Douglas J. Brewer describes the work Manetho's history was, in essence, a chronologically of events arranged from oldest to most recent according to the reign of a particular king. Brewer continues on to describe the events which inspired Manetho to write history. How long is this? Let's go to the early habitation. The earliest evidence of human habitation in the region is throughout by some to go back as 700,000 years ago. The oldest evidence of structures discovered thus far were found in the region of Wadi Halfa, ancient Nubia. In modern-day Sudan, These communities were built by a hunter-gatherer society who constructed mobile homes of flat sandstone floors, most likely covered by animal skin or brush and perhaps held up by wooden stakes. The actual structures vanished centuries ago, of course, but man-made depressions in the earth with stone floors remain. These depressions were discovered by the Polish archaeologist Waldemar Chmielow in the 1980s. CEN were designated tent rings, and by they provided an area to set up shelter which would easily be taken down and moved, similar to what we'll find at a modern campsite. These rings are dated to the late Paleolithic age of immediately. See, it's not really telling me what I want them to tell you on here. Let me see hunter-gatherer societies. Okay, the hunter-gatherer societies, I'm trying to see. It's not really telling you. I'm gonna have to look into the other slides that I was looking into, and it was talking about how these hunter. Nah, I think that's what they're talking about with the hunter-gatherers, though. Because if I'm not mistaken, the hunter-gatherers were the ones who started to bring meat into the Egyptian society. When they brought the meat into the Egyptian society, that's when the curse started. That's when we got put out of the Garden of Eden. That's when we got put out of the Garden of Eden, when we started to eat meat. But anyway, let's go to the next slide. When the Greeks ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great. When Alexander the Great seized Egypt on his mission to conquer the Persian Empire in 332 BC, he was one in the long line of Greeks who were dazzled by Egypt and its ancient culture. The legendary Greek historian Herodotus had remarked in the 5th century BC, this country has more marvels and monuments that dignify descriptions than any other, and indeed those marvels and monuments had been drawing Greeks to Egypt for centuries. That is why the Greek pharaohs came as tourists, traders, diplomats, and soldiers. Despite this cultural contact, the art and architect of this Egyptian kingdom had retained its distinctive style and uninfluenced by its frequent visitors. In fact, Egypt's unique art forms had persisted for more than 3,000 years. When Ptolemy, one of Alexander's generals, came to rule Egypt, he found it wise to adapt the older culture. He installed himself as pharaoh, built a new capital at Alexandria, and united the major gods of each nation to form a new universal deity, Zeus Amon. See, they tried to push their deity onto the Egyptians. The era of Ptolemy's dynasty is known as the Ptolemaic period, acknowledging the 300-year Greek rule that began with Alexander the Great and ended with the suicide of Queen Cleopatra in 30 BC. It was an age of profound curiosity and rich experimentation as the Greeks and later the Romans met an established culture far older than their own and exchanged artistic, social, and religious ideas with the ancient civilizations. Now you see that? When the Greeks and the Romans came and established their culture, they met an established culture far older than their own. They exchanged artistic, social, and religious ideas with the ancient civilization that goes with the Greek pharaohs and the Egyptian pharaohs. They made a truce because they got tired of going through war and arguing, because you have to remember, this was a point of time when the women ruled, but the men were starting to take the throne, which is why the Bible came. Remember when Daylight did that freestyle, take the woman out the word of the Lord, get it Bible, like Bible. You get it? You know what I'm saying? So that's basically that's why you see the women as strippers right now. But they exchange artistic, social, and religious ideas with the ancient civilization. So they put stuff together, so you have the truth mixed in with the lies. It's a whole lot. This exhibition explores the confluence of cultures through over 75 artworks. Gilded mummy masks, luxury glass, magical amulets, and portraits and stones and precious metals demonstrate the integration of foreign styles while also paying tribute to enduring legacy of ancient Egypt's distinctive culture. And this is pretty much how all of that happened. You guys need to do some more research on your ancient Egyptians. A lot of people think that the Romans and Greeks came and stuff had been happening before they had even came. Our people fucked up, and this is our time to fix their fuck ups, and the government is making it hard. But for you to get a bigger understanding of what I'm saying, you can go to Brother Sanchez's page, and if you guys want, you let me know, and I could put some links in the description on the next video I drop, and y'all can check his page out because he's really a beast with this kind of stuff. But Chosen Gang out.